The RG35XX is a handheld by Anbernic that wants to take a slice of the mini handheld pie. Anbernic has obviously seen the incredible sales of the Miyoo Mini over the last year. In fact, it actually won our best retro handheld of 2022. It was that good. So classic Anbernic are slithering in to see if they can make something just as good. They have priced the RG35XX at a competitive $55, making it a good entry point for those looking to dip their toes into the world of handheld emulators. Once I took it out of the box, I was immediately surprised at how big this is, especially when you consider that it's trying to compete with mini devices. This isn't mini at all. If anything, it's not too far off the popular RG353V, which in my eyes is a normal sized handheld. The size of the Miyoo Mini is what makes it magical, and unfortunately Anbernic hasn't even come close to creating a magically small device. Because of the size, this now puts the RG35XX in the same boat as any normal size handheld, which actually causes it to have somewhat of a disadvantage due to the lack of power in the device. The RG35XX features a 3.5-inch IPS display with a resolution of 640 by 480, a quad-core ARM A9 CPU, a PowerVR CPU, 256MB of RAM and 2100 mAh of battery capacity. There's nothing to shout about, but don't forget this is just $55. In terms of design, I will admit it's a simple, sleek-looking device that looks nostalgic and lightly nods at the old classic Game Boy DMG. For example, the small slant at the bottom right of the device near the speaker grille. Half of the face is taken up by the large 3.5-inch glass screen, which has small bezels to it to keep it looking fresh and modern. The screen used is lovely, it's very bright, and due to the 4:3 resolution, most retro games look superb on here, especially Game Boy Advance games. However, there is some light bleeding in the corners of my device, which is sometimes noticeable in menus. In games, it almost disappears. This is slightly disappointing, but it's almost expected from Anbernic, as they often tend to cut corners with quality control. Below that you have your D-pad, which is soft, firm and easy to press. Anbernic has a track record of making nice D-pads, and this is one of them. To the right you have high gloss action buttons, which have a nice feedback to them, but mine tend to get a little slippery and sweaty after long playtimes. And if you are someone who likes to eat snacks and play, this is going to be hell on earth. I just wish they stuck with non-glossy buttons like their other devices. Finally, you have your start select buttons, which again give it that Game Boy vibe, and your centered menu button for emulator settings. Around the sides you'll find your other less important buttons like on-off, volume, a mini HDMI out, which is a little odd because there's no Bluetooth to allow for connecting controllers, USB-C charging, a headphone jack and a reset button. The lower half of the device is thicker as it holds the 2100 mAh battery. This also gives it a nice center of gravity and allows Anbernic to place shoulder buttons just above it to add to the comfort levels. However, not so comfortable are these shoulder buttons. They're not stacked, they have zero travel to them, and they're very clicky, making the overall experience feel very low quality and rushed. These are quite simply just horrible shoulder buttons that I don't enjoy using at all. Above that you can see why I mentioned that Anbernic lacks any kind of quality control. The bloody sticker is upside down, for goodness sake. In the hand, the RG35XX is a good weight and a good size for those wanting to throw it in your pocket, but I'll stick to my guns here, this is not a mini handheld, not even close, and the shoulder buttons let down the overall ergonomics of the device. When you turn on the device, you will be greeted with a low quality operating system, and unfortunately because of the lack of Wi-Fi, there's no easy way to change this, and you're kind of stuck unless you don't mind scouting the web for a new OS and learning how to install it manually. Again, this is another indicator that Anbernic has rushed this. However, the OS is very easy to understand even for newcomers who have never touched a handheld emulator. And the bonus is that it comes preloaded with thousands of games, teasing even more newcomers to give it a shot even if they don't know how to install their own ROMs. It's a very simple device, but in some ways that's what makes it compelling to many. I could easily give this to a child and they would understand what to do, even if the OS is a little outdated. Now let's talk about performance. Due to the RG35XX's specs, it can only emulate games up to and including PlayStation 1 games. There's no Dreamcast or PSP on this thing. The CPU and the tiny 256 megabytes of RAM just can't handle it, but that doesn't make the device bad at all. The performance downgrade has allowed Anbernic to price this at $55, and that makes the lack of performance somewhat acceptable. Any more power would require this device to feature an analog stick that would make the device even bigger, more expensive, and look probably even more ugly. So keeping it niche has somewhat giving it a charm, just like the Mayu Mini. I found myself levitating towards Game Boy games on here. The 4x3 display helped immerse myself into the world of Pokemon, and although the device is small, the screen feels big compared to the overall real estate of the handheld. The same goes for NES, SNES, Neo Geo and Game Gear. The screen makes it a pleasure to play on and the colors are strong, there's no issues with frame rates or screen tearing, and the speaker is loud enough to keep things nostalgic. PlayStation 1 also had very little issues. It ran as it should and the 3.5-inch screen did well, although some text was a little small in some games, but that's really it. Anbernic have created a very mediocre handheld here, and they know it. So much so that they priced it at $55, so that reviewers like me give them some leeway. Pricing it this low saved them in many ways, and although it's not a handheld that I would personally buy, but it's certainly one I can recommend to those wanting to buy their first handheld emulator. It typically comes preloaded, cutting out the fuss of having to install your own ROMs. It has a nice 3.5-inch screen, opening it up to older adults who don't want tiny little screens. It lasts a good couple of hours on a single charge, and the menus are incredibly easy to understand, making it a good starting device for children or adults. And that's where I think this handheld sits on the market. It's for beginners only. It lacks performance, it lacks build quality, and it lacks ergonomics. So to recommend this to the average handheld consumer isn't something I want to do, but the price makes it a great first buy for those new to the market and don't mind lacking on the build quality. I don't love it and I don't hate it, but I just wish they truly made it mini. Maybe next time. So there you have it, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.